Geminis are so much more than just a two-faced chatterbox. Let's talk about the true essence of Gemini. Hola, beautiful souls. Welcome back or welcome to my channel, where we merge the cosmos with everything self-development to become our highest selves every day. If that sounds like something you're interested in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss future videos like this one. If you want more from me, you can also follow the links in my description to follow me on social media and download my free astrology cheat sheet, which makes astrology so much more digestible for you. Today is all about the Gemini sun sign. What this means is at the time that you were born, the sun was moving through the constellation of Gemini. I'm going to start the video with an introduction to the sun in astrology. That way you understand its energy better so you can better understand this video. Then we're going to discuss 5 prominent traits in somebody who has a Gemini sun. Then we'll finish the video with a few empowering tips because I don't just like to drop the information on you. I love to give you some empowering tips to follow so you can optimize your life if you are a Gemini sun or if you know somebody who is. First, let's talk about what the sun means in astrology. The sun is one of the 2 luminaries in astrology that are considered one of the 9 planets in astrology that shape who we are. The sun is considered the planet of our individual identity and the ego self. The placement of the sun in our birth chart governs our identity as an individual, what makes us unique and separates us from everyone else. The symbol of the sun actually showcases this, as the circle itself represents infinity and everything being intertwined, whereas the dot in the middle represents the separate self. It is through our sun sign that we're able to uncover our personal identity, who we truly are at our core without the influence of anything or anyone else. It indicates where we find our sense of personal power, purpose, and overall direction in life. The sun gives life, so the sun sign is what gives us life, what makes us feel fulfilled, and what makes us glow. The sun is literally where we derive our life force energy. Now, let's talk about 5 defining traits of somebody who has Gemini sun. But first, it's important to remember that Gemini is the mutable air sign ruled by Mercury, symbolized by the twins. Number 1. Gemini is the communicator of astrology, oftentimes correlated with Hermes, the messenger god. Gemini rules over the 3rd house in astrology. Stay tuned. I have a video on the 3rd house coming up very soon, but it is the zodiac ruler of the 3rd house in astrology. The 3rd house dictates the area of our lives in which we communicate, how we tend to process information, how we learn in the world, how we intake information in the world. So this is associated with the messenger god Hermes, because Hermes was largely in charge of transferring messages from one god to another, creating a system of communications. So Gemini is very much connected to our systems of communication, including our own internal system of communication, how we portray our thoughts, how we think about things, what we believe things to be based on how we process them, and then how we communicate them to the world. This is an important defining trait of Gemini because no matter what energy the Gemini takes on based on their other placements, communication and the mental process will always be a foundational part of who they are and their soul's core essence. This is why oftentimes Geminis need to yap. They need to release those thoughts, because if they do not, they're going to feel extremely stagnant, conflicted, frustrated. And if they don't continue to learn and indulge their mind and their curiosities, they will also feel stuck, frustrated, and caged in by life. Number 2, Geminis are the true inquisitive educators of astrology that the world can learn so much from. Not only does Gemini rule over the 3rd house, but Gemini rules over the 3rd house with Mercury. Mercury is Gemini's planetary ruler, further connecting this zodiac sign to communications, to the mind, to the mental process. Because of this natural connection to Mercury, Geminis always need to learn. If you've ever met a Gemini or someone with a lot of Gemini placements, they're super inquisitive. They constantly ask questions about the littlest detail-oriented things that most people don't even think about. The best way to look at it is Gemini and Sagittarius share the same axis in astrology, meaning that they're sister signs. But Gemini is the sign, it's the version of Sagittarius that focuses in, it magnifies the little things. Whereas Sagittarius is the big picture version. They're the visionary, always looking at the far away target that they can hit. So whereas Sagittarius is zooming out, Gemini is always zooming in on the littlest, tiniest details that most people probably miss. This is largely correlated with Mercury being their ruler. Mercury is the planet. It's the little tiny, quick orbiting planet that really moves fast, and it like looks at the tiniest little details and it intakes information. It intakes things very quickly. And that's why a Gemini's brain is constantly going and constantly inquisitive and constantly notices things that nobody else probably pays any attention to or cares about. And Geminis can definitely drive themselves nuts by being this way, but a way to satiate that energy and a way to satisfy it is to always remain openly inquisitive, indulge in your need for knowledge, indulge your curiosities. It is something so beautiful about the fact that Gemini doesn't stray away from other paths and doesn't stray away from different journeys. They are often beautiful conversationalists because of the fact that they are so open-minded, simply because they want to learn. Unlike some of the signs or some of the elements that might get a little caught up in their personal feelings or personal bias towards things, Geminis, first and foremost, seek to learn. Therefore, they can contain bouts and bouts of wisdom and knowledge for others to learn from because they have soaked up so many other life experiences, perspectives, knowledge, education, in order to learn for themselves. And oftentimes they enjoy relaying their communications. This is also why Geminis can be gossips because they truly enjoy relaying communications, just like Hermes, the messenger god. However, this also bleeds into education. They can be amazing teachers, educators, writers, someone that relays information and makes it understandable, digestible for other people. Number 3. Geminis are often wildly intelligent, but many write them off as simply goofy or silly. Gemini is an air sign. The air signs are also all governed by the mind. All the air signs have a lot of activity with the mind because that is what the air element is connected to. With Gemini, that goes up tenfold because of the previous 2 traits we talked about, being associated with the 3rd house and being ruled by the planet Mercury. On top of that, they are the air sign. Being an air sign gives them great potential intelligence because there is so much inquisition going on in the mind constantly. Their brain soaks information like a sponge, often retains it amazingly well, and then they can educate others with it and relay that information to others in a way that is understandable and digestible, which is such an incredible talent, which is such an incredible gift. However, another archetype that Gemini is associated with is the court jester or the Joker archetype. You know, not like the Joker, but well, I could see the Joker being a Gemini. But I digress. I mean like the Joker cards, like, you know, traditional Jokers. That is another archetype Gemini is associated with because they often can be a little cunning or mischievous, and they can come off like they're immature, goofy, and they don't really know what they're talking about because Gemini enjoys not taking life too seriously. Most of the time, they are much more free-spirited, they like to play around, they can come off flirtatious to others just because they're a playful spirit. They enjoy good senses of humor, jokes, lightheartedness. However, a lot of times this can be confused with them being immature or actually not being as intelligent as they are. But don't let a Gemini fool you. A lot of times, Gemini is probably fooling you. Most Geminis, unless they have other placements throwing this off, are not driven by pride. So they don't always care if you see them as intelligent. Whereas Aquarius, another air sign, does actually want to usually be seen as intelligent. They don't like to be caught slipping, and they have pride in that way. Whereas Gemini is much more openly goofy most of the time, and they're like, I don't care if I look silly, and I don't care if they think I'm dumb, but if I need to show them that I'm not dumb, I will. Don't get it twisted. But because of that, they walk the line between being so intelligent, but also being in touch with that childlike, silly spirit. And this plays into the fact that, again, they are connected to the third house, which is considered the third phase in our lives. Houses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all associated with our younger years, but especially houses 1 through 4. They really correlate strongly with our childhood upbringing and the way that we have developed in the world and become who we are. Because Aries, Taurus, and Gemini are the first 3 signs of the zodiac year, they are the most youthful. Gemini being the most youthful air sign, they are in touch with their childlike silliness, their childlike spirit. This can make them really good with kids and be seemingly innocent, even if they say the most outrageous things, which I would never put it past a Gemini to say something outrageous that you've never heard in your life. Even if they say something outrageous, there can often be such a curious innocence about them. However, the dichotomy that is there is that they are often extremely intelligent and they withhold a lot of information. They retain information so well, making them so wise in their own way. So do not be fooled by their seemingly mischievous, cunning, charming, silly, playful personality. Number 4, Gemini suns display an underrated amount of magnetism that no one talks about. Geminis are one of the mutable signs in astrology. The mutable signs are the signs that are more adaptable. They pivot well in life and they often do good with change, or they actually need certain change in their life to feel alive, to feel more fulfilled. With that being said, Gemini is the mutable air sign, which makes them able to mentally pivot very quickly. This is one of the things that can give their mind so many different avenues at all times. It's one of the things that makes them open to other perspectives in life because their mind has that mutability, that adaptability to understand others and to understand various things. And they're also very mentally adaptable, which is what makes them great, enticing conversationalists most of the time because they're very witty. They have the gift of gab and they can leave you speechless with how quickly and how intelligently they will respond to something. But not only are they the mutable sign, but tying into their mutability, they are symbolized by the twins. The twins is what makes them seem two-faced, or what people like to call Gemini two-faced, because they have two sides. They have a dual nature, but it's not in the way that people think. Their mutability and their dual nature heavily contributes to their ability to be a contrasting personality. It's not necessarily that they're two-faced. It's not that they're showing somebody one face and then another person another face and they're lying to one of the people. No, it's the fact that they are able to be a chameleon. They're able to be a chameleon, but when a chameleon changes colors, it's not changing what it is. It's still a chameleon. It's still what it is and the being that it is. All it's doing is shifting its colors so it better fits the environment. This doesn't mean that Gemini is lying about their personality or putting on a facade or hiding themselves. Of course, this can absolutely be true. And if there's anybody that was going to put on a facade, it might be a Gemini. Their duality and their ability to be a social chameleon is too often misunderstood as them automatically being fake or two-faced. As somebody myself who has a lot of Gemini in my chart, I am a Gemini rising and a Gemini moon. I understand what it feels like to feel like your personality is trying to be caged into one box, one category that you just can't be placed into because you are drawn and open to so many different things. Because of that, when you're around one person who may extract one part of your personality, you tend to color yourself more so to that person. Then you can meet another person who extracts a different side of your personality and feeds into that different side. So that's the part that is most dominant when you speak to that person. It's not that you're lying about your personality. It's that those parts of your personality are showcasing themselves strongest depending on who you're around. And this is what makes Geminis a social chameleon, because they're able to put on the different colors, different shades, depending on who they're around. However, all of those colors and those shades are still part of who they are and things that they enjoy. They just enjoy so many different things. They can't decide on one personality. They can't decide on one part of themselves to display every single day. They need to embrace their multifacetedness. And if anybody starts to make them feel caged in because they're trying to pressure them to be one thing, to choose one path, or they're making them feel incorrectly judged for being this multifaceted person, that's what's going to make a Gemini run from you, shut down, or actually become fake. So more times than not, they can be overthinking certain interactions if an interaction has made their free-spiritedness and their inquisitiveness feel caged and misunderstood. They can start to over-question how they speak, how they verbalize, what personality they show up as. And this can be detrimental to a Gemini. So I strongly recommend, if you have a Gemini around you or you are a Gemini yourself, do not stifle them. And Gemini, do not stifle yourself, because that multifacetedness is what makes you magnetic. And this is something that is not talked about enough with Gemini. A famous Gemini that displays this quality was Marilyn Monroe. The world was absolutely enamored with Marilyn Monroe, and it's because partially, I mean, of course she's physically gorgeous, but we know that physical attraction is not everything. It's not enough to keep people enticed by you. People are not going to be that obsessed with you to the point that they were with Marilyn Monroe if you're just another pretty face. It was also partially due to the fact that she displayed contrast. She seemed so kind of like ditzy and innocent and girly and like feminine, but then she would also be so seductive in a very womanly, mature way. Then she would turn around and do like a little oops, you know, like a cute little like oops, like girly feminine thing. Then she would turn around and be like a siren. Then she also displayed intelligence. Once you got to know more about her, she was a very intelligent woman, and things she did were very calculated, and she was well educated in that way. She wasn't just a pretty face. There was so much more to her than that. And that's always the case with Geminis. There is always more than meets the eye. Always. And once people start to see that, they start to become enamored with Gemini. Not to mention Gemini's often charming, playful nature that attracts people, but it's also when people get to see just how much a Gemini encompasses that they can become obsessed with them. And I never see people talking about Gemini magnetism, but it is very much an apparent thing when you pay attention. Now let's talk about ways that you can thrive as a Gemini sun, because when this energy is balanced properly, it can be so truly magnetic. Number 1, you need to be doing regular journal dumps or some other way of venting. Again, Gemini is probably the most concentrated mental sign in astrology. There is so much going on mentally, and they can feel pulled in hundreds of different directions all the time, creating like an inner chaos. It can feel like an inner tornado that is always happening if Gemini is not making sure that they're clearing out their head regularly. Writing is such a healing thing for Geminis. And if you cannot bring yourself to write, start by venting in the voice notes on your phone. Some way that you can verbalize your emotions, what you're thinking, because verbal processing is an actual method people use to better understand a situation and to work through a situation emotionally. It's one of the reasons that therapy sessions help people, because they're getting to verbalize things, and that allows your brain to better process it. Why do you think in school they had us take notes? They made us write notes down and then answer questions and actually speak about it, give presentations about it, because our brain is actually able to make the connections to actually understand something better. But if you leave your brain as a Gemini, especially just a jumbled mess of everything you're constantly thinking, you're going to struggle to have mental clarity. You might have a lot of mental fatigue. It'll easily manifest as anxiety, overthinking that leads to anxiety, to panic attacks. The list goes on. Regularly dumping your thoughts, whether it's verbally through vocalization or through a journal dump, writing it down, just dumping all your thoughts on a page. This will really help disentangle your mind from all the millions of thoughts that race through it at any given moment. And it'll give you so much more mental clarity and calm to move forward. Gemini is heavily connected to the nervous system as well, so nervous system regulation is key. Number 2, Geminis should regularly practice imperfect action. Speaking of Geminis being overthinking and having extremely active minds, often to their own detriment if they're not careful, we need to be actively breaking you out of analysis paralysis, because if there is any sign that can get caught in this, Gemini is probably the number one contestant because of the activity of the mind causing them to overthink. But not just that. Geminis don't just overthink, but they can see every possible path. They can see so many possibilities. They can realize that if they choose one path, X, Y, and Z might happen. But then if they choose that path, X, Y, and Z might happen. And before you know it, your brain has a bunch of spiraled, intertwined, crazy branches going in every which direction. And now you've stagnated because you have no idea which way you should go, because you have thought yourself into a crazy spiral of all the possibilities that you don't even know where to begin, and now you're overwhelmed, so you stagnate. And because Gemini tends to be a sign that is so focused on the tiny micro details of everything, they can get too caught in the micro details, making sure that something is a certain way before they proceed, or thinking of all the things they have to do before they proceed. No, you need to regularly practice imperfect action. That way you build the trust muscle that you can figure it out. You do not need to have everything figured out before you start something. You do not need to anticipate every possible outcome or every possible path based on the step that you're trying to take forward. That will get you nowhere. If you want to get nowhere in life, you want to continue to be victim to your indecision, then by all means, keep doing that. But if you don't, if you want to know how to start breaking out of this, you need to start practicing imperfect action. You don't need to know all the steps to get to something. You just need to know the first step to get to something. What is that first step, and how can you act on it? Act on it, and do not listen to all of the thoughts that try to branch you out into a million different unproductive directions. Focus on that first step and take that first step, no matter how tiny it is. Number 3 is to have regular grounding rituals that tap you back into the physical. Again, Gemini can get so caught in the mind that it can be extremely unhealthy to their productivity, to their mental clarity, their mental state, and their physical state. Their physical state can lead very nervous and anxious if they aren't careful, because like I mentioned earlier, Mercury is heavily connected to the nervous system, making Gemini heavily connected to the nervous system. This is why many Geminis, if you pay attention, it is highly likely they struggle with certain things like bipolar disorder, ADHD, other mental disorders of some kind, or just mental struggles in general. It doesn't have to be categorized or diagnosed as anything specifically. They can just have a mental battle that they are always facing in some way that is often connected to the nervous system and how their brain is functioning. Because of that, it's so important that they have grounding rituals. Even though Geminis probably think that something like meditation is the bane of their existence, it can actually be the thing that potentially saves you. Because as an overthinker who is heavily tapped into the nervous system, you are constantly giving your energy away and exhausting yourself by giving your energy to a bunch of things in your mind that aren't even real or aren't even relevant. That's because you're not grounding yourself. You need to keep this energy grounded so that way it does not control your life and run your life. I highly recommend starting with short meditations, especially breath work. Breath work might actually be the best place to start first before you expand into meditations. And you can start with 5-minute meditations, but breath work taps into your nervous system and practices regulating your nervous system through the breath, which can be key for Gemini, especially because breath work is extremely easy, accessible, and quick. It doesn't require a lot of focus and concentration. It can be a key place for you to start tapping back into the body and out of the mind. And in that same vein, getting out and being in the elements is important because the air signs are up in the air, they're swirling up in the clouds. So making sure that you're actively bringing yourself back into the physical is very important. So going out and actually enjoying nature, not just walking through nature to get over with, but actually engaging with the elements, touching the leaves, hearing the birds, feeling the grass, touching the water, the stream, maybe even wading in the stream if you can, bringing yourself back down to earth regularly alongside tapping into your nervous system and regulating it through things such as breath work and meditation will allow you to bring your energy back to yourself rather than being so exhausted by everything you have going on in your mind that is actually not even productive. The real Gemini is deeply curious, magnetic, and multifaceted. And if this energy is properly balanced and embraced, this person can really light up a room. If you're a Gemini or love somebody who is a Gemini, be sure to comment down below and let me know. And if the video helped you at all, be sure again to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos like this one. But until I see you next time, adios.